I called my talk today, Wow, Aren't We Fortunate? Because we really are, aren't we? Yeah, we are some of the most fortunate people in the world, and I think at times we forget that. And if you look, we're some of the wealthiest people in the world here in this room this afternoon. We've all got a roof, we've got a bed to sleep in, got more clothes than we're wearing today, and there's food in the fridge at home. That puts us in the top 25% of rich people in the world. That's incredible, isn't it? It gets better. You got a bank account? Yep. Got some money in it? Got a wallet? Got money in it? Some spare change at home? With that, you are in the top 8% of the world's wealthy. Okay? So we are indeed a very, very fortunate people. Prior to Neolife, I was a pretty wealthy medical doctor. I had a good practice. I travelled the world giving lectures, and I was overweight because of the prednisone and other drugs they were giving me for an autoimmune disease that I had started when I was 21. They even advised Joan not to marry me, and last August we celebrated our 51st anniversary. I was going to a medical reunion in Wellington, and I was going to go down and see the guy who diagnosed me. It was correct diagnosis, and I was going to say to him, Prof, right diagnosis, you got the prognosis all wrong. Do you know what the beggar did? He died 2 weeks before the reunion. Oh, I mean, you know, come on. That's taking it too far, isn't it? How to stop aging. Stay active, not just physically active, mentally active. It's really important to stay mentally active. Whether you do Sudoku or you do crosswords, or whether you learn another foreign language, it's okay. Aunty Molly says vitamin D. She used to get it in her garden growing raspberries organically. Now she gets it from CalMag plus D. I heard a program on TV recently about people over the age of 100. Let me tell you some things I learned. None of them lived in cities. Isn't that interesting? None of them had high-stress jobs. They all grew all of their own food. Okay? How many of us are doing that? No, not many. You try. That's good. Keep trying. You saw the statistics on New Zealand. They're actually taking notice. Do you know what they're doing in New Zealand schools now? They're teaching home gardening. And older people are going into the schools to teaching home gardening, so all is not lost. But you know, we live in a world where fear and hate abound, don't they? I know, when I was hearing Fred for a start, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what was top one? Cancer, heart disease, stroke. What was number 4? You've got they've forgotten diabetes already, Fred. Okay? And there's another one right under the list that he did. You know what that is? No. No. Chronic respiratory disease was the last on his list. That's true. What's the one underneath? Mental disease and mostly depression. And you heard Fred's stuff on depression. Take note and act. Okay? Because depression is not far behind chronic obstructive respiratory disease. Fear. Fear's not good, is it? You know, for me, one of the things we've got to understand is that we are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. Is that true? Yeah. And one of the lessons we came here to learn was about love, was it not? Yeah, love. You say, oh yeah, well I'm, you know, pretty good at love. What about fear? Fear is the antithesis of love. Okay? Fear is the antithesis. And it often is shown as procrastination, and it's often shown as lack of self-confidence. When it comes to a GNLD business, there's a lot of procrastination, isn't there? That's because of fear, is it not? We haven't dealt with our fear. You know, of the common universal fears, number 1 is fear of death. Number 2, fear of failure. Number 3, fear of success. One of the things about life that many of the great men have said is you become what you think about, but also you become like the person you hang around with. It's being around positive people who are on the same page as you. And that is a really important thing for your mental, your emotional, your total health. So when I talk about love, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the things up there. Happiness, kindness. You know, being kind, being tolerant, being patient, being gentle. All of those things up there are expressions that you are actually living the love that you say you've got. How many of you could do with a bit more kindness in your life? A bit of more tolerance? Yeah, exactly. Fear is the base emotion from which comes hate. Our world, there is so much hate in the world today, is there not? Yeah, so much hate. Anxiety, depression, prejudice, greed. You know, they talked about the 7 deadly sins, and it's not become fashionable to talk about those. But, you know, greed, gluttony, the 2 big G's, envy, malice, all of that stuff, they were called deadly sins. And today, with the science that Fred was talking about, we understand that those things actually are true. Gluttony is a deadly sin. And we practice it every day in our society. And I just couldn't help but put in a little bit, I believe, that fear closes your heart. And fear fuels negativity. And boy, do we see it in our world today, and hopelessness. We're talking about living a new life. You know, if I was to ask you, say, what do you want to achieve from your talk this afternoon, Bruce? I want to give you information, I want to give you inspiration, and I want to give you motivation so you actually go out and do something. Now, the other big fear that people are facing is coming out of the medical profession and all the research that's going on there. Women are being asked, have you had your genetic structure done? Have you got the BRCA1 or 2? And what's the medical solution to that? We can cut both your breasts off, thanks. You know, does that make you afraid? You know, I heard one of my granddaughters talking about, well, I'm going to have my breasts off. You know, and I said, why? She said, well, I could have the BRCA1 and 2 gene. You know, I said, you need to spend more time with Grandma. You need to hang around Grandma more. What was the other one up there? Oh, the doctors, their other thing is surgery, we'll cut it out, or else we'll drug you into submission. No, they don't quite say it that way, but we'll find a drug that counteracts what that gene's doing. Well, I've got great news. Your DNA is not your destiny. And that's another title for my talk. You know, your DNA, you're not a victim of your DNA. Okay? There's a heap of stuff you can do. Back in 1953, Sir Francis Crick, the guy who explained all about DNA to us, said that information goes in one direction, from your DNA to your RNA to your protein. And most people learnt that in school. We know that stuff. Okay? And that's called the central dogma of medicine, and it's a scary dogma because it's so obviously not true. Now, every cell in your body has the same genetic pattern in that cell. Okay, you've got 23 pairs of chromosomes, okay, and each of them has genes on them, but every cell has the same pattern. But when I look at Doreen's face, they're picking on you today. Not only do I see a beautiful woman, okay, but I see some teeth, okay? Well, teeth is not the same as skin, is it? And I can see hair, I can see eyeballs, I can see lots of different tissues. If I was to make a Y incision in here and pull it apart, I could see a heart, lungs, go a bit further down, we'd see a liver and a spleen and all these other things. but they've all got the same DNA. How come you've got all these different tissues? And the answer is there's a controller in charge of how the genes are expressing themselves. Okay? They call the total of your genes your genome. Okay? And they call the thing that controls your genes your epigenome. Okay? Why epigenome? Because medicine stole a lot of its language from Greek. And in Greek, epi means above. So it's above the gene. In other words, it's in charge of the gene. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, the epigenome teacher tells the gene what to do. It says which genes are going to be turned on, which genes are going to be turned off, which are going to be half on or half off. And that's really interesting stuff because epigenetics, a new science, is in it. What it is, it's the study of things that affect genetic expression, but doesn't involve changes to the genes themselves. Now, if we started to teach you epigenetics, it's like, oh God, it's going to take us at least 8 hours a day for a week before you get the basics. But I'm going to give you the basics in a way that I hope you will understand them. Okay, so it's about things that control the genes that don't involve altering the genes, which is what they're trying to do with drugs, but they can be passed down to successive generations. Okay? There's a piece of rope there. I'm going to use it in a minute. That was put there to remind me. Now, if you want to look at the pictures, you can go online, you can see a picture, and you can see a chromosome. It looks a bit like this, okay? And it's got these, they've expanded one of the genes, and you can see that code that Dr. Hooper was talking about this morning. Okay, we've got about 3 billion of these things. Now, the controller of those, the epigenome, I'm going to explain to you really simply, and I like to have someone from the company. Lisa, you were sitting by me. I'm sure you'd make a very good chromosome. Would you like to be on stage and be a chromosome? And would you like to stand over there? Because you're getting the best position, they won't be able to look at you. Okay, so make like a chromosome. Very good. That's like the picture up there, isn't it? Well done. Give her a clap. Okay. And here's a piece of genetic code coming out here. Okay. I think it's a double helix. You know, it looks like a double helix. All right. Now, what happens is you can come and make yourself comfortable. Sit over there. Just be really comfortable. And would you? Oh, I've got a thing here. Now, if you're explaining genes, there are things that turn genes on. The process is called methylation, okay? It also can turn genes on halfway, so we'll have a blue one here. Is that all right? So we've got some genes, and those are genes that are turning on good stuff in the body. There are some genes that can be turned on, that when they're turned on, they're associated with aging, all right? Now, what we'd like to do is to turn on the genes that are associated with longevity. I think I ought to put a few more green ones on. I would feel more comfortable if I had a few more green ones here on things that are associated with longevity, all right? Don't like all that red stuff. That's a process called methylation. Okay, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. There's another process where there are what are called coiling proteins. And these coiling proteins, cause your epigenome here to coil up and not be active. Can I borrow you two lovely people down here? Now, actually, could you stand about here? About in there, good. And could you stand about here? Okay. And these are really nice genes. These ones, you know. He's actually associated, he's the gene that stops all the male cancers. She's the gene that stops all the female cancers. And see, unfortunately, what can happen is, if they're not having the right diet that Fred was talking about, and if they're exposed to all that pollution, and if they're listening to rock music, could you just come here? Right, and what, I need you to just come here a bit. And what happens is that this can happen to two of them like this, and, you know, this is the process that actually happens in the body. It's a bit scary. Just get a bit closer. I'll pull you tighter. Okay. They didn't know they're going to get this close over convention. They say convention draws people together, doesn't it? Now, when they're like this, just get a little closer for the moment. You see, the gene that protects, or the genes that help protect from female cancers can't be active because they're hidden. Are you with me? And the same's happening with him. That is not the situation. And what happens when you start to take your Neolife products is it starts to unwind. Okay, isn't that good stuff? So wow. Now you heard Fred say you cannot take Neolife. Fred, I'm right on the edge of the stage. I'm well aware of this. I'm only a year younger than him. Okay? He said you can't take the Neolife and eat all the junk food and expect to be right. Right? Because there's the junk food still looking at them. He's having slightly more junk food than she is. Right? Do you get the picture? Okay? What we know is, from epigenetics, that information flows in both directions. Okay, and that was done with bacterial studies. They fed bacteria, they stuck bacteria in a plate, bacteria that couldn't eat lactose. Within 3 days, they'd worked out how to eat lactose, okay? And that showed you that it could run both ways. Genes can be activated and deactivated by signals from the environment. Wow, okay? It's not just your genes sitting there doing its stuff, the environment activates it. Genes can change their expression depending on what is happening outside ourselves and even our bodies. Do you know, you can use the same group of chemicals in your adrenal gland to produce two totally different hormones. Most people out there today are stressed. Would you agree? Someone was describing the typical person. I think it was Damien this morning. And you're on your cell phone, you're doing all this stuff, and you're keeping in contact on Facebook, and you're doing that, and you've got to check it every 10 minutes or whatever it is. And, oh, they don't like me. Oh, I'll unfriend them. You know, that kind of lifestyle is creating a huge amount of stress. Stress, the adrenal gland puts out with chronic stress a hormone called cortisol. The acute stress one, adrenaline, cortisol. But if you swap the anxiety and the worry and the stress in your life and decide that you're going to come from joy and from love and from happiness, those same chemicals can be turned into a hormone called DHEA. All you need to know about it is it's the hormone of longevity and good aging. So, you can have the stress one, or you can have the hormone of longevity and good aging. It is entirely up to you. Now, here's another thing. Every cell in our body has a type of consciousness. Where is that consciousness logged? They've now discovered that that is in the cell membrane. But for us, all we need to know is that the cell membrane is the seat of, it's a seat of consciousness. You know, I describe the cell membrane like the bouncer at a nightclub. How many of you will admit to have been in a nightclub? All right, and the rest of you are slow at getting your arms up. You need more salmon oil, okay? Right. There's a guy from Duke University. His name's Dr. Randy Jirtle. Randy Jirtle is famous for discovering that you can change things by changing diet. And he's the one who says you can methylate or demethylate genes. So if you happen to have you happen to have tags that are needed, good tags, and they've fallen off, like those pegs could have fallen off, by good nutrition, you can put them back again. Wow, is that good? Nutrition's not a fleeting affair, okay? We literally are what we eat as well as what our grandparents eat. Now, gentleman there with the camera taking photographs of that, his ancestors came from Sweden, okay? And there was a guy called Bryggen, way back prior to World War I, noticed that in Sweden, that when they had a good winter, the health of children deteriorated. And he thought, this is incredible. And what's going on? If the weather's good, why are the kids not doing so well? And he finally realized they were getting too much food. And so he called them gluttonous winters. A gluttonous winter. Then they followed those kids. They first followed the boys. And boys who had a gluttonous winter in their childhood, their descendants, children and grandchildren, were more prone to coronary disease or cardiovascular disease of all kind. They found the same thing in girls, and when they put it together, the statistics were frightening. And most people didn't want to look at his work. Okay? It's been followed up many years later. Okay? Now, what Jirtle found was some of the interesting key things there were, I'm going on this side, second to bottom line over the other side, B6, B12, folic acid, choline, and betaine. They changed the colour of the rats or mice that he was working with, but they also decreased the risk of obesity, diabetes, and cancer in the offspring. Here we are, Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre is the guy who got into histone research. And Jean-Pierre's research was very interesting because he said everyone has tumor suppressor genes capable of stopping cancer cells. Suppressor genes are in every cell in your body, but so are histones, or these coiling proteins. And that's because of the crap that you eat. I didn't eat one of the breakfast cereals this morning, the yogurt. I ate the homemade yogurt. If you looked at one of those tubs of yogurt, there were 13 chemicals in it, right? And the last on the list was the acidophilus. So it was full of all other stuff. Do you need 13 chemicals? They offered me a pie on the plane, and the pie had 21 chemicals. Has anyone ever done any research of the long-term effect of having that combination of chemicals? No. Each one is, by the FDA, generally regarded as safe. But think about the person who's eating the takeaway food that's full of those chemicals. Doreen makes just the savoury things at her takeaway shop, and Lynn makes the sweet things at her shop, and they're next door to each other, and they're creaming it with money because both of them have got a lot of sugar in it. She covers her sugar with lemon juice, and she knows that the more lemon juice she puts in, the more sugar she can hide. Okay? But when you look at what's in the stuff they're selling, because they have to have it safe for the people to take, and they have to make it look nice and have emulsifiers and lengthifiers and all these other things. Anyone ever done any experiment on the combination? No. You're eating junk. Okay? Now, it says histones can hug the DNA so it becomes hidden from the cell. Did we see that with Nicole and thing? Do you understand this stuff? Yeah, it's actually quite easy when you've seen a piece of rope. And you can all afford a tow rope and a few pegs. Okay? And it says, if a tumor suppressor cell is hidden, it cannot be utilized. And in this way, too much histone will turn off these cancer suppressors and allow cancer cells to proliferate. Now, how much of that do you need? Let's get it really simple. What is it saying? You've got suppressor cells. You all right? You've got suppressor genes. if you choose to eat crap, okay, if you don't make your food, if you don't grow your own food, or if you don't buy it from the farmer's market from people who you know are growing it, okay, you are starting the process of wrapping up the good stuff in your genes, and you won't want to do that. Does that all make sense? Can you understand this stuff? I mean, I think it's exciting stuff. Food affects the epigenome is the summary, isn't it? Now, other researchers, and I won't give you all their names, have found that foods such as broccoli, kale, radishes, well, cruciferous vegetables, garlic, onions, leeks, chives, and other alien vegetables are histone inhibitor. By regularly consuming those foods, you're naturally supporting the body's ability to prevent or fight tumours. What did Fred say to you this morning? Trouble is, you're not eating them. He put the figures up there to prove it. But we got the answer. Now, when they talk about epigenetics, they talk about epigenetic modulation, stuff that can affect them, okay? And what's the one at the top there? It's diet, isn't it? The one at 11 o'clock is psychological stuff. And the psychological stuff, you can download that off the internet. It's really easy to get, okay? Just go epigenetic modulation diagram, and that'll bring that up. I chose diagrams that you could get easily off the internet. Okay? The psychological stuff is if you are living from fear, if you're living from anxiety, if you're living from depression or hate or any of those negative emotions, you are negatively affecting your body, and you are putting on methylation in places where you don't want it, or putting on histone, using histone as a wrapper. Okay, social interactions. Well, what's this? This is a social interaction, isn't it? Yeah. Do you know I'm a really shy person? And when I started reading this stuff years ago, I realised I had to get over my shyness. Okay? It was easy to be a doctor because they just opened the door and someone came in. You know, that was easy. I didn't have to look for them. And now my grandchildren say, "Granddad, why do you talk to everybody everywhere?" And I said, "Because that's my job." But that man was laying concrete. I said, "I don't care. It was good concrete." What did I say? You said to the guy, "That is a beautiful piece of concrete. Looks really great." And I said, "What did the man say?" He said, "Thank you, sir. I appreciate it." And when I walked back the other way, the guy said to me, "What do you reckon now?" I said, "Even better." He'd done some extra troweling or something. Okay? People do not get enough recognition. People do not get enough thanks. Up there, probably alternative medicine. You know, that's the way the other people think about people like Rowan and the naturopaths and the other people. They're alternative. I think they're a good alternative, all right? A very good alternative. Therapeutic drugs are theirs. Microbiome. What the heck's the microbiome? Microbiome is the bacteria in your gut. So important for your health. You can read all the other things down the other side, but there's, Fred talked about toxic chemicals. There they are. It's not just cigarettes, it's all the other stuff in the environment. Dr. Bruce Lipton, just to look at him, you want to go to his lecture, don't you? You know, what's he doing? He's smiling, he's happy. He's heard the research, and it says if you come from happiness, joy, and love, you're going to live longer. But see, what he says also is the true secret to life does not lie in your DNA, but within the mechanisms of your cell membrane. Wow. Each cell membrane has receptors that control the reading of the genes inside your cells, and you can choose, your cells can choose to read or not read the blueprint, depending on what you're giving them. What you eat, what you choose not to eat, what you hear, what you choose not to be around, and that includes your music. Who you associate with, who you tend to avoid. All of that stuff is affecting you, and it's affecting your cell membrane. And of course, we're into cell membranes. And the final message is you are in the driver's seat. You can turn on the genes of longevity wellness and vitality and turn off the genes of aging. You are responsible to do it in your life. You can change your gene expression by the things you think, say, do, eat, avoid, listen to, and what you ponder in your heart. Fred said, if you're not going to exercise, the products are not going to do you so good. I want to add to that. If your heart is full of bitterness and resentment and hate and all of that other stuff, you can take as much salmon oil and treanin and full motion for your arthritis. Ain't going to get better, all right? Because what you're pondering in your heart is important too. Okay, thank you very much.